Hello and welcome to another edition of Sri's Sunday New York Times Read Along. Today is June 20th. It's Father's Day. Yesterday was Juneteenth. It's World Refugees Day. And our guest is Cate Doty, author of Mergers and Acquisitions, or Everything I Know About Love I Learned on the Wedding Pages. She is a writer and former editor at the New York Times. It's going to be another great show with our host, Sri Srinivasan, Marshall Loeb Professor at the Stony Brook School of Journalism and co-founder of Digimentors. My name is Neil Parekh. I'm the executive producer and guest host of the show. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our website. We're also live on Cate's Twitter account and her husband Michael's Facebook page. So thank you, Cate and Michael, for that. Please like, retweet, comment, share, tag your friends. Let them know we have a great show planned for today. Again, my name is Neil Parekh, and we're going to go ahead and welcome a few folks who are watching. Of course, our friend Jonathan Borstein is watching from the East Village. Teaser, Jonathan is going to be our guest next week on the show. We'll talk more about that later. Patricia Freudenberg wishing everyone a happy Father's Day, joining from New York. Our friend Julia Weeks joining from Brooklyn. One of the producers on the show, Deborah Kerr, joining from Asheville, North Carolina. I've actually been to Asheville. A really great friend of mine lives there. Great part of the country in North Carolina. Ron Thomas is joining us from Dubai. Ron, always great to have you. Thank you for joining in. And of course, Patricia saying she's joining from New York. So with that, we'll bring on our host, Sri Srinivasan. Sri, how are you today? That's a different background. Where are you? Hold on. Where are you, Sri?
I am in Long Island and just happy to be here. Happy Father's Day to you, Neil. And to everyone who's watching, happy Father's Day to all the father figures also in people's lives. I also liked Deborah's notes as happy Father's Day, and to all the single mothers who picked up the slack.
Sure.
So we certainly appreciate them as well. And greetings to all of you. We're live on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And we would love for you to share this on any of the platforms, hit retweet, share, etc. Tag a friend, and they can watch later. Of course, we wouldn't be able to do the show on Mother's Day because we'd want to be with our wives that day. But today's Father's Day, so we get to do what we want, and we wanted to do this. So we're happy to do this. And we want to thank our awesome team. Without them, we couldn't make this show happen. Neil is the executive producer. He's at Neil Parekh. Paula Kiger is at Big Green Pen. Steve Taylor at Steve DeReeve, Julia Weeks at Julia L. Weeks, and Carla Baranauckas at Kabara. And Carla is our awesome booker who is able to bring us so many great guests, including our guest today. Let's remind people who's joining us. Cate Doty is here. She's the author of Mergers and Acquisitions, or Everything I Know About Love I Learned on the Wedding Pages. And she's a former editor at the New York Times, where she covered the news of food, weddings, business, New York, and more, and was a weddings writer at the New York Times. So please welcome her in just a few minutes. You'll get to meet her, but we have so many great folks watching. And Linda Lawrence is in sunny Long Island, and Paula Kiger is watching from and working from Tallahassee. And Ron Thomas is calling our team the A-Team. So our company, Digimentors, does these kinds of programs for folks. We also do social and digital consulting. We make conferences, summits, webinars, talk shows, and training and workshops. If you are interested in any of this, please reach out to me, Sri at digimentors.group, and Neil at digimentors.group. We'd love to talk to you about working together on any kind of digital or social event or project that you might have. We also want to thank our sponsor, MuckRack. They do fantastic work for both journalists as well as communications and PR professionals. Please check them out at muckrack.com. And if you'd like to sponsor this show, we've been doing this for more than 5.5 years, bringing together a worldwide community that's interested in the facts, interested in news, interested in newspapers, and interested in the New York Times. So please join us and help support this program. Just email me or Neil. And we have others watching. Naomi says, Happy Father's Day from the Upper West Side. And Patricia says, also Happy Father's Day to those in heaven, and also bonus dads that didn't have biological children but are still dads. And Diane says, Happy Father's Day to the awesome New York Times Read Along team. Thank you for always being there for us. And thank you, Diane, for being part of our great community that's watching on a regular basis and supporting us, sending us guest ideas. We're always looking for those. So please do let us know if you have guest ideas for us as well. And Neil, let's do a shout out to our own fathers. Big hello to my dad, T.P. Srinivasan, who is in Kerala, India, and to all my uncles and other father figures in my life. Over to you, Neil.
Thank you, Sri. Certainly want to give a shout out to the fathers in my life, in particular, Pam's father, Eugene Stumpo. I still remember when we made that shift when we were dating, and I think engaged at the point. They said, go ahead and call us mom and dad. That was a big deal from Mr. and Mrs. Stumpo. And of course, my own father, who passed away about, trying to look at the date now, right? It's 2009, so almost 12 years in October. And so definitely means a lot. And as folks know, Sri mentions the story a few times, and I'd be remiss if I don't mention, my love for the New York Times, for news. It really comes from my dad. I remember growing up seeing the little blue bag for the New York Times every day. It was something that was part of growing up. And in fact, when my dad was cremated, one of his wishes was to be cremated with a Sunday edition of the New York Times. Sri gets choked up when he tells the story. I certainly start feeling it. And Father's Day is hard in particular. And Patricia made the comment earlier, and I want to bring that up again. This is a hard Father's Day for a lot of people. And it's not just folks, especially with coronavirus, people who lost their dads in the last year, who might be fresh. For some folks, this is their first Father's Day without their father, and that's hard. But there's also there's so many situations out there that we're not aware of, and just want to be sensitive. There are people who are not who are maybe estranged from their families, and Father's Day brings up very difficult memories for folks. So as while we're celebrating, while we're honoring fathers, we also know that it's a difficult day for folks, and we want to let you know we're thinking about you as well.
Carla has posted Happy Father's Day to all the dads, especially my nephew Charlie, who just became a father. And Paula says Happy Father's Day to all in our community. And it's just great that we know it's a tough day for some of you and send support your way. Thank you, Paula, for that. And we are very grateful to everyone who's watching. And just before we bring on Cate, we want to say today is so many other things. We're marking today, Juneteenth, the first time it's a federal holiday this weekend. So happy Juneteenth as part of the racial reckoning in America that happened after the murder of George Floyd. We've had a chance to think about a lot of things we didn't at this point last year. We also are marking Pride Month, and also it's World Refugees Day today. So lots going on. And for Pride Month, we are going to end our set of June shows with our guest, Jonathan Borstein, who's going to be with us, who is a writer, urban ecologist, flaneur. If you don't know what that is, he will explain. He's a writer and editorial consultant. And we will talk about Pride Month and what's happening with the LGBTQ community, all the progress that's been made and what still has to happen. And we are very excited to have a long-term, very supportive member of this community be a guest on the show. So please join us. And Neil, tell us about what's coming up.
Absolutely. In addition to Jonathan, we're going to take a break for July 4th, Independence Day in the U.S. So no show that day. But then July has great guests: Margalit Fox, Philip Bump from the Washington Post. We'll do a special WAPO read along, and then Shashank Bengali is going to be our guest July 25th.
And Margalit is a well-known obit writer at the New York Times and so much more. So we're excited to have her, and can't believe we get to do another Washington Post read along. We went to the home of the deputy editor
Mark
of the Washington Post, Mark Fisher, a couple of years ago, and we were in his home live when he read the paper. And then Shashank Bengali, former LA Times India bureau chief, is now with the New York Times in London, and he'll be joining us July 25th. So lots of great shows coming up.
Every week, 8:30 to 10 a.m. Eastern Time on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube, and our website. So let's go ahead and take a look at what's in the paper, Sri.
Yeah, and then we'll bring Kate on. So just very quickly, the front page we'll read with Kate, but the lead story: clash of visions as New Yorkers vote for mayor. Iran election could speed nuclear deal. And how an expression of freedom, Juneteenth celebration in Harlem on Saturday. Events across the nation recognize the end of slavery on June 19th, 1865. The Sunday magazine cover is Finding My Father by Nicholas Casey. Book review cover, The Vital Center, The Last Best Hope, George Packer's book, and Jonathan Roche's book as well. The Sunday business cover is What Are We Going to Wear? Trend forecasters have eyes on more than TikTok, or they look at TikTok more than they do at the runway. Metropolitan cover is The Changing Face of Casting a Line. Women defining salty stereotypes could save the city's struggling party boat scene. And real estate cover is My Sister, My Neighbor. At the height of the pandemic, some siblings decided to move into the same building to create an instant safe bubble. And the 21 best TV comedies of the 21st century so far is the cover of art of the business section. And Sunday review, Who's Juneteenth? Caitlin Greenidge and Kevin Young, I'm sorry. And the road trip, like everything in our world, hitting the highway has changed, though it's still about exploration, beauty, and pleasure. And so this is a special section just about the road trip, perfectly timed. And then we'll be spending time on the Sunday style section, because this is the section which Katie did a lot of contributions to and a lot of writing. And what's in this tuna sandwich? This is about a lawsuit about Subway sandwiches and whether it's actual tuna in the tuna sandwich. So hard-hitting story there that we will want to look up. So I think, Neil, with that, we are ready to say hello to our special guest.
And before we do that, I want to just call out this great post, this great comment about your father, Sri.
Oh, wow. Thank you. Ambassador Srinivasan is a father figure to us. He helped me personally. Thank you, Parthiban. Beautiful. Really appreciate that.
And with that, we'll bring on our guest, Cate Doty. Again, Cate is the author of Mergers and Acquisitions, or Everything I Learned About Love, I Learned on the Wedding Pages. She's a writer and former editor at the New York Times, where she covered the news of food, weddings, business, New York, and more. And we'll talk to her about her new book. But first, Cate Doty.
Good morning.
Good morning, Katie. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us where you are, how are you, and how's your family been handling the pandemic?
I am fine. I'm great, actually. I should say that. We are very lucky. We are in Raleigh, North Carolina. We moved down here about 4 years ago, actually just at 4 years ago. My husband and I were both working as editors at the Times, and we decided to take a buyout for many reasons, mostly being it was just time. And we moved back to North Carolina, which is where I'm from, to be closer to family. And my husband ended up teaching at UNC School of Journalism. among other things. And here we are. I have a 6-year-old who I can hear just outside my door. But she's learned to very quickly not to come in when the door is closed. So
That's a very well disciplined 6-year-old. That's great.
well, I wouldn't go that far. I wouldn't go that far. And her dad is not stepping up. He's taking care of her on his own Father's Day. So
yeah, I'm so grateful to him. This is unusual that he agreed to let you do this on Father's Day.
He has been, he always rolls his eyes when I say this, but he has been beyond supportive. And of course, he shakes his head and said, that's what everybody should do. But I know that's not what everybody does do. And so I am always grateful for him.
Folks, I'm sitting outside in a friend's home in Long Island, so you might hear some traffic go back and forth. Katie, I'm looking forward to meeting you in person at some point because my daughter is going to go to Duke this fall, so I'm going to be in the area. So I hope I have a chance to say hello to you. So let's start by talking about first, as you saw me kind of go through the paper in that fashion, what do you think about when you see it laid out that way? I don't know if you still subscribe to the print paper, but seeing it laid out, there you go. And you get it early enough at home on
Yes.
in North Carolina. That's good to know.
Yeah. We get, I'm sure you know about the dots. We get the four dots. So it's probably the late national, I guess. I'm not sure. My husband would be able to tell you that, but we get the national edition. It's printed locally, of course, and we get it in the same bag with our local paper, the News and Observer.
Oh yeah, very good paper, local paper. We want to support local journalism. For those of you who are new to us and joining the show, Katie's friends especially, we do this every Sunday, and it's not really just about the New York Times. It's about journalism. It's about facts. It's about fighting misinformation and disinformation, and we encourage you to subscribe to your local newspaper. A lot of people who watch this will say, we've resubscribed to the New York Times. I went and bought the New York Times today, but that's not the point of the show. It's to support journalism overall, and so we're glad you're subscribing to the News and Observer as well, Katie. And can you tell us what the lead story is in the paper there?
On the NNO, it is, Newspapers investigation spurs push to slow North Carolina speeders.
So there you go. Impact journalism. So they must have done a series on speeding, right?
I think they did.
Yeah,
I don't actually know.
Yeah,
and
but that's great.
It is about restaurants after post-pandemic, and then Juneteenth.
All right. So as you see the paper, and especially you left 4 years ago, do you seeing the paper like this, what does it mean to you? How do you think again about the paper?
The paper still feels very much like home to me. It was my first job out of school. I met my husband there. Some of my closest friends are still there, people I'm in constant contact with. And so for me, when I look at the paper, and also my husband and I both used to work the Sunday morning shift, which is a Bulldog shift. The Bulldog is, of course, the first edition that, if I remember correctly, it goes to like Lowe's movie theaters in New York or something like that. Like, has a very small distribution. But at any rate, the first edition that goes out is called the Bulldog. And so, I still remember, and I feel like to a certain extent I have in my bones what it's like to put out a Sunday paper. And when my daughter was born, my husband was the Saturday Metro editor at that point. And his job was just to deal with, whatever news broke on Saturday, as well as get the Bulldog out and get stuff get breaking news lined up for Sunday. But the day before my daughter was born, 2 cops were gunned down in Brooklyn or I can't remember. I don't know, but it was the first double cop shooting in years. And of course it consumed his whole day. And so he went to work. This happened overnight. He went to work at like 6 o'clock in the morning. He was there until 1 o'clock in the morning. And then I texted him and said, I'm having contractions. We need to go to the hospital. And so I think by the time my daughter was actually born, he had been awake for like 36 hours or something. And much of that had been in service to the paper, getting the news, getting the story right. And so whenever I pick up the paper, I always think about the people behind it and how important so many of them are still to me.
Well, that's lovely. And it's a real community at the paper, of course. And now you're a New York Times alum. and so much going on, obviously, in journalism and the media changes and everything. And we try to talk about that as much as we can here. Let's talk about your book. Such a fun title you have. We have a card that we can put up again to show people and talk about the book a little more. It's called Mergers and Acquisitions, or Everything I Know About Love I Learned from the Wedding Pages, a compulsive, readable, behind-the-scenes memoir that takes readers inside the wedding sections of the New York Times, the good, the bad, and just plain weird, through the eyes of a young reporter just as she's falling in love with herself. So that's here's a review in Marie Claire. If your weekends consist of devouring the weekend section, the wedding section, Cate Doty's Mergers and Acquisitions needs to be on your TBR list. That's the beach read list. Is that correct? Is that?
I think it's to be read.
To be read list. Okay, and maybe on the beach as well in the summer, right? Yeah.
It has been on several best beach reads of the summer list, which is very
nice.
Funny.
And here's Martha Stewart Living, Mergers and Acquisitions. Former New York Times journalist Cate Doty's account of her time on the weddings beat is a reception-worthy buffet of juicy backstories that didn't make it into print, including her own. So that's fabulous. So tell us about the book, please. Oh, well, sorry, one more. Look at this. Laced with frank reflection and entertaining anecdotes, this is a winning portrait of love and ambition in the 21st century. Publishers Weekly. Yay.
I like that one. I mean, I like them all, obviously. So let's see. So I started writing the wedding announcements when I was 24, and I had moved up to New York from Washington, basically because I wanted to live in New York, and I wanted to be with this dude I've been dating since before I graduated from college. And so when I moved up there, I moved up as a clerk, which is, a phone answerer, paper deliverer, coffee maker, a catch-all person. And there's tons of them floating around the Times newsroom. And clerical culture is a very particular thing unto its own. But one of the clerical jobs is to be a seasonal wedding announcements writer. And this very lovely clerical supervisor at that point, a woman named Erica Summer, who I believe is working on the magazine now, asked me what I wanted to do. And I said, whatever you want me to do. And she said, well, how about writing the wedding announcements? And I said, yes, I would love to do that, because I was moving up in the spring. And at that point, the wedding season was from basically like April 1st to the end of October. And so they needed a young clerk to go in there, and because it's a fact-checking job, a lot of this is really fact-checking. You're calling these people, you're asking to make sure that everything they submitted is correct and true. You're checking how they spell their names, what their occupations are, and then you're checking with their HR departments to make sure that, of course, they're telling you the truth. Everything from if this is their first marriage, if this is their only marriage, this is the date they're legally getting married on, all of these things. So I just wrote the wedding announcements. And a friend of mine at that point, Jennifer Lee, who was at that point a reporter on Metro, I believe, kept saying, this is a book, this is a book, this is a book. And at the age of 24, I had no perspective on how this could be a book. But, I ended up spending 15 years at the Times. I met my husband. Our story and romance was very much, it happened in the newsroom. And it happened as I was learning about the romances and the relationships and the ultimate choice to commit from all these different brides and grooms, from these couples that I wrote about. And so when we moved back here, I guess it took being away from two places that I loved so much, the Times and New York, to really have the perspective to be able to write this. But it's a memoir. It's a memoir of my time writing the wedding announcements, being a young journalist in New York City, coming of age in the greatest city in the world, and also ultimately how I decided that being committed to one person was exactly what I wanted to do, even after having fought it for so very long. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, Kate, we wanted to ask you about this wedding announcement that's in your book.
Yes. So one of the things that I tried to do with this book is really trace the historical lineage of wedding announcements and how they're not just gossip. They are actual news, and they help trace not just people's lineage, but mergers and acquisitions of power, of societal power, economic power, political power, however you want to call it. And so this wedding announcement I highlighted, this was from 18, I should know this. I can't remember, 18 something. And this, you'll see the names in there, Vanderbilt, Smith, those are two pretty significant names in New York City society. And these wedding announcements, this particular one was back around this time, there's a group of women, the Smith sisters. There were a couple of Smith sisters, and they all married extremely well. And they married extremely well several times. This particular woman, I believe, ended up as an Astor because she divorced this guy, Mr. Vanderbilt. No, she divorced Mr. Yaznaga, I think. But anyway, so these people got married. They had this fabulous society wedding. Everybody in McAllister's 100 was there. You know, so Ward McAllister was this sort of gadfly journalist who created this list of what he thought were the 100 people in New York society who mattered the most. So the Van Rensselaers, the Van Wicks, the Vanderbilts, the Astors, anybody whose name was on the side of a building or who really held a significant power in New York society was on this list. And so these wedding announcements really, back in the day, really captured the economic and political and to a certain extent romantic movements of these people. And so those two people in particular I highlighted because I think Mary Smith actually ended up having 3 wedding announcements in the paper, and and also that at that point the Times also covered their divorces as well, which they don't do anymore, I think, to society's detriment. But at any rate, the one reason I really wanted to include her was that her last divorce announcement, this is not that this was submitted, but it was covered, was right next to the wedding announcement or the wedding coverage of Ida B. Wells to her husband, Mr. Barnett, in Chicago. And so I just thought it was a really great example to demonstrate how economic power and societal power is demonstrated through these wedding announcements over time.
And we also wanted to ask you about this picture.
So that's my wedding. That's my wedding. My husband, Michael McElroy, who at that point was, what did he do? He was the assistant to the public editor. He was working with Clark Hoyt at that point when the Times had a public editor. We got married on April 24th, 2010 at Ashland Highland in Charlottesville, which is the former home of President James Monroe. And Dan and I worked together. Michael McElroy is his name. Dan and I had worked together for a long time on the beginnings of his This Land column. I think it was around 2007, 2008. The National Desk tasked him with the extraordinary job of finding a story in all 50 states and territories. I don't know if he ever went to Guam, but anyway. And so he needed a research assistant and somebody to help him because there's just no way you can cover an entire country. Because also the way that Dan writes stories or Dan finds stories, he's not a parachuter. You know, he does an enormous amount of research, and he just needed somebody to help. And we had worked together on Hurricane Katrina in New Orleans, and I forget what I was doing at the time. I think I might have been working in the regionals or something like that. But when they asked me if I wanted to basically sit and read tiny community newspapers from all 50 states from across the nation and really try and help readers understand what was going on in this enormous, unwieldy country of ours. Of course, I jumped at the chance. And also I jumped at the chance to work with Dan, who at that point scared the shit out of me. But he doesn't anymore. Anyway, we became really close. And when my husband and I decided to get married, we are not spiritual people. We don't have a spiritual leader, and we couldn't think of anybody else that we felt had the that we wanted to lead us down the path more than Dan. So
but he was the unofficial officiant, yes. Right?
Yes, because in certain states, including the Commonwealth of Virginia, internet ministers don't hold up. You have to actually have some sort of formal training, I think. So we actually had to pay a retired sheriff's deputy $50 to come sit in the back of our wedding ceremony, watch us get married, and then sign our wedding certificate. So legally, and in our wedding announcement, it says like Deputy D.L. Duncan of the Albemarle County Sheriff's Department married us, but Dan married us. I do remember that Deputy Duncan had egg on his tie.
What a great set of stories. Let's tell everybody that Dan Barry was a guest on the show. And folks can go back into our YouTube archive and see the Dan episode and so many other episodes. We've been doing this for 5.5 years. And you can find them all on my YouTube channel, YouTube/SriNet. And we already have a question. I know many people are going to ask this. Our friend Julia Weeks is asking any tips on getting into getting her wedding announcement this fall into the New York Times.
Oh, congratulations to Julia. I'm so excited for you. So I swear to you, people who have bought this book, I really think that's one reason why they bought the book, to find out how do I get my announcement to the New York Times.
So we want everyone to buy the book for that for sure, but some general tips, yeah.
General tips. Well, first of all, so I think this is so great. They just named a new weddings editor, a woman named Sharana Alexander, and you can find her on Twitter. And she has been toiling in the weddings trenches for years. And I think it's a wonderful thing that she is now leading the section. She is a Black woman she's the first person of color, I think, to hold the position of weddings editor. And so I was so excited to see that she was named to lead the section. So to get your announcement in, well, if you've noticed, they've changed them. Where's this section? They're only like 3 or 4, and they're all vows. They all feel like all vow stories now. I don't know what's going on with the actual announcements. Like, I don't know if there's some great shift going on behind the pages or not. But anyway, number 1, get your announcement in on time. Number 2, make sure you cover every single detail they ask for. Don't leave out any phone numbers. Don't leave out any contact information. What else? Make sure that the date that you put in your wedding date is your legal wedding date. This catches up a lot of people. The Times will only print announcements pegged to the date on which a couple is getting legally married, right? So like if you're going to the courthouse, if you're going to City Hall before you jet off to Bermuda or whatever, because that makes things a lot easier, your legal wedding date is when you go to the courthouse, not when you stand on the golf course in Bermuda and get married. So make sure there's that. Make sure you have a good story. I think that's really the most important thing is that you're truthful, but the second most important thing is that you have a good story. I think there is this whole thing about how people who get married and they have their wedding announcements at the Times, they went to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, whatever. They work in banking and they're marrying a lawyer and they met each other at a party at the Hamptons. But as you can see in the paper this morning, that's just not true anymore. I think that the wedding announcements have gotten so much more diverse over the last couple of years. I mean, it's been a long time coming and they have so much further to go, but just the examples that are in the paper this morning and the things that they're willing to talk about now. I mean, I remember writing a vows column years ago in which it was for a man and a woman, but the woman had previously only dated women before that. And one of the editors went through the most insane mental gymnastics trying to figure out how to avoid the word lesbian. I mean, so we've come a long way since then. And again, there's so much further we have to go. But I think that the developments in the announcements have made them that much more interesting and that much more exciting to read. I am a sucker for a good love story. And frankly, the people working on the weddings desk are too. So tell a good love story and be truthful and check every single submission, every single box in the submission, and you should be fine.
And there are specific instructions on how to get in here. They still have phone information, which is so interesting. But I see what you mean, that these are like mini articles rather than the shorter ones. Is that what you're talking about? That so what I wonder what has happened. And there's only I guess there's one couple more here. So they're
Yeah.
longer than usual.
They're
And-
stories. I mean, it used to be, I should have pulled mine out of our file cabinet. I mean, they used to be just the head, and then like Cate Doty and Michael McElroy were married on Saturday evening, and blah, 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 blah. And it would be like 250 words, something like that. Rarely the reporters, myself or Vinny Malazzi or Rosalie Radomski, would pull out a nugget that would make for a good sort of mini story that would be like 400 words. But these write-ups that you see now, that's a fairly new development. And I love these. And I think there's a real diversity of perspective in these that has been lacking from the pages.
And of course, one of the things that you mentioned that has really struck me is how much more diverse these announcements are. And because of, marriage equality now, you see weddings like this and others, people of color. When you started, did you worry at all about working for a section that might have been a little elitist and things like that?
Well, to tell you the truth, I didn't really know that much about the wedding announcements. And that sounds kind of BS, like Meghan Markle saying she didn't know much about Prince Harry before they started dating. But it's true. I mean, the wedding announcements that I grew up on were things that I grew up reading and read every Sunday in the N&O or the Fayetteville Observer Times or the Birmingham News. These had details like in my mother's, the bride carried a bouquet of lilies and white roses. And, after their honeymoon in Orange Beach, Alabama, they will make their home in Raleigh, that sort of thing. Like, that's not what's in these announcements. And so that's part of the reason why I wanted to write this book, because when I started writing these announcements, I had no idea what I was getting into in terms of learning about a certain echelon of society. And it was, one of the first announcements I had to write was for the retired senior senator from the great state of New York, which was just insane. Which, I was a cub clerk. I was 23 years old. But you talk to these people who held huge economic power, political power, whatever you want to call it. And it was a real shock to me. I really had no idea that I was talking to, on a daily basis, I was talking to at least 4 millionaires. So it was the first season, I will say, there was a huge learning curve, but it was fun. But in terms of diversity, I probably could count on one hand the number of people of color I wrote about that first season, for sure.
Changed over time?
Pardon?
And that changed over time? You were able to write?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, absolutely, for sure. And also the number of same-sex couples, because the first same-sex couple announcement was I believe it was in 2003, which was the year before I started writing them. And it was a union. They called them unions because they weren't, of course, legally recognized for a while until 2004, I guess, was the Bearsfeld versus Hodges. But at any rate, they were still very few and far between. And the weddings editor at the time, who in the book is named Ira, but in real life is a sweet, most wonderful man named Bob Wolitz, he made a concerted effort to, I think, accept almost every same-sex announcement submission that came his way, because he got so few, and he wanted to make sure that people were represented in the paper. He also knew that about people of color. I remember him talking about how he had many conversations with leaders of Black churches in New York, trying to get them to encourage the couples getting married there, to submit their announcements to the Times, because you can't, generally speaking, you can't run a submission that's not submitted, if that makes any sense. So everybody.
Yeah. One of the things that we thought would be fun is to show some wedding pictures that are not in the paper, but from the families that put together this show. So this is a wonderful photograph of Carla's parents, Molly and Charlie Baranauckas, June 23rd, 1951. And so that's an anniversary date here. And here's Wayne and Paula Kiger, August 8, 1992. And you can see the Twin Towers in the back there. Obviously very emotional to see that, and Paula looking great. And this is my wedding with my bride, Rupa. And of course, in any Indian wedding, the family is very much involved, and there are parents there. This was, by the way, Kate, a small Indian wedding, only 500 people. And that's where Neil was invited as a substitute for his dad. But I didn't know Neil. He was a friend of my father. And he said hello at the reception line, and that's how we first met. And again, that would not happen in a typical American family, because you would know people who are attending your wedding, but not an Indian wedding.
It was classic. I walked up, and I actually knew Shree's father before I knew him, which was great. And then we'll follow that up with my wedding picture with my wife, who got her PhD from the University of Washington. Always proud to put the doctor in there. August 24th, 2002.
Neil, she still married you with that haircut. Look at that.
She still married me. If you want to talk about the haircut spree, I had to get a haircut from somewhere I wasn't used to, up in Victoria, British Columbia. I still am not happy about that haircut.
What did they do? They put a bowl on your head and then just cut around it? What did they do?
I have no idea what they did. But
look, you
hey,
have better.
Shree, can you turn your camera on for a second?
Sure.
Because let's get you back on the screen.
No, I was going to say, Neil, that you're a person who has better hair all these years later than the rest of us.
The wedding.
I have worse hair or no hair compared to what I had.
That's why I want to get your main camera. At least I have hair, Shree.
Yeah, exactly.
There we go.
You guys always throw down like this.
We have fun together, and we've been Shree's been doing the show for this is the 6th year, and I've been producing it for 3 years, and so we have fun when you spend Sunday mornings together. This is what you get. Our last picture is our friend Julia Weeks and her Isra, or her fiance. They got engaged in December, and I believe that they have a summer wedding date later this summer. She did ask on Twitter as well. So just as a point, if you're watching on Facebook, on Twitter, you need to click on the video itself to leave a comment so that we can see it. But Julia did ask Shree whether you were an officiant, or whether Dan Barry can give you some tips on how to become an unofficial or official officiant. Of course, Dan was a guest on our show, a special guest. We did a tribute to Jim Dwyer last year after he passed away. We're still waiting to get waiting to get Dan as a full guest on our show. So the campaign continues. Dan Barry Fan Club. Dan Barry, just say yes, please. Just say yes.
And Julia, I am not an officiant, but I would be honored to become one. And Julia is also, by the way, clarifying the wedding is in September. And she is also recommended that everybody buy the book. Let's remind everyone of Kate's book and what we're doing here today. We are interviewing Cate Doty. She's at Cate Doty. Everybody, please follow her on Twitter. Our website is catedoty.com. And she is, as it says right on the cover, former New York Times wedding writer. And Kate, I'm impressed by the use of a non-New York Times font in the title of your cover there. And tell us the thinking behind that, and in the whole cover, the title, all of that's so fascinating to folks.
So
you can hold up the book if you have it.
Sure, I do. As a matter of fact, I usually don't, which is an amateur move on my part. So here's my book, and you can also see it there. The cover, so Putnam is the publisher, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House. And I remember when my wonderful, wonderful editor, Michelle Howery, I keep looking up here, emailed me the cover. She said, I told the cover designer I wanted it to look like Gia Tolentino, but about weddings. And I thought that's awesome. So this is what they came up with. The New York Times' font is proprietary. We can't, I think anyway, so there's no way Putnam could actually use it without significant money involved, I think. My one requirement for the cover was that it not be Tiffany blue, because you see all these wedding planning books about Tiffany, they're Tiffany blue and they have a big ivory bow on the cover. I will say I was not expecting my first book to be coral pink, but I think that it fits it perfectly. And when I opened up the cover, I thought, this is it exactly. And but the title itself, so, as I've said, these wedding announcements chronicle the mergers of families, the mergers of bank accounts, the mergers of power. And I forget how long it's been, these pages have been called the mergers and acquisitions pages. I mean, David Brooks first wrote about it in 1998, I think. And that was before his book, Bobo's in Paradise, came out. But the first chapter of his book is about the wedding announcements, about what the society pages, which is what they used to be called anyway. And how these announcements, again, chronicle mergers of power and the rise of the, what does he call it? I don't know, the achievement class, whatever you want to call it. And so when I was crafting my proposal for this book to send to my agent and ultimately publishers, we sort of tossed around different ideas, because it is a memoir about my own personal love life and my love of weddings. And then, of course, it's a memoir about writing at the New York Times. And so we needed to capture all of these things together. And I remember sitting at an Ethiopian restaurant with my writing group. I have 3 wonderful women who I'm very privileged to be in a writing group with. And we were tossing around ideas. And my friend Eleanor said, let's just call it mergers and acquisitions. And that's what it was. That's what it was, because we all knew the origins of M&A. And it's true that everybody loves love. And it felt a little bit snarky, because the book's a little bit snarky. I will say that everything I learned about love, I learned on the wedding pages. It's not quite right. It's not quite accurate. But this part was workshopped to death, because we needed to make sure that the idea of it being a memoir was in there. And the cover of the cake topper with the frosting on their faces, this was something done by Sandra Chu and Anthony Raimondo, who are the art directors at Putnam that did the cover. And I laughed out loud when I opened it, because it was exactly what I wanted to show. I wanted to show how beautiful love is and how wonderful marriage can be. And also you can end up with stuff all over your face, especially when you're, writing about it. So that's where it came from.
Love that. Give us 2 things you learned about love in the wedding pages.
So I wrote the wedding announcement for Sheryl Sandberg and Dave Goldberg. And I think, we all know that Dave Goldberg died tragically when they were on vacation in Mexico. And of course, she wrote a book about it, Option B, or Plan B, Option B. And since I think she's getting remarried. But at any rate, I remember talking to them. So at that point, I was wrestling with a lot of stuff. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I had decided to go to graduate school to get my master's so I could be so I could be a foreign correspondent. Little did I know, you don't actually have to have a master's in international relations to be a foreign correspondent. Anyway, I was wrestling with ambition and what I wanted out of just everything. I was in my late 20s or mid to late 20s. And I interviewed Sheryl and Dave for their wedding announcement. And I walked away from those. And Sheryl at that point was an SVP or a VP at Google. She was a big deal. She had been with Larry Summers recently. Like she had already accomplished more at 30 something than I will ever probably accomplish in my life. But at any rate, I remember talking to her, and when we were talking, the way that she talked about her future husband and the support that he gave, and just how much she relied on him for her own professional ambitions was startling to me, because I didn't realize that you could do something like that. I didn't realize that kind of partnership was possible. And then when I talked to Dave, he was a very kind person. And the way he talked about Sheryl made me realize, this could be you can sort of have it all. I mean, you can't actually have it all, but you can have it all in one person if you choose right. And so that was one thing I walked away with. And number 2, a famous feminist told me not to write about my marriage. And I wrote about a little bit about it, but that's as far as it goes. I'm not going to ever write about my marriage. I think some things, I think Nora Ephron would obviously disagree with me, but some things aren't copy. So some things belong to us.
All right, folks. That's Cate Doty, and we are here reading the New York Times together. So pleased to have you. Thank you so much, Cate. And let's just look at some of the comments that have been coming in. We have Diana watching in California, Lake Shasta, at 6:30 in the morning and even earlier. So Diana, welcome. Thank you for your support, always being here. And let's see here, Carla. Oh, here, you go ahead. You know, yeah.
No, it's Tim. Tim and I were clerks together. Hi, Tim.
And he says, I've been mispronouncing her surname for many years, even when I worked with her.
It is Doty. I didn't want to interject. It's okay. It's okay. People do it.
All right. Well, so that's so thank you. And great to have Rajan with us. And let's see. We have other comments here. Carla says, kudos to Michael McElroy. He and Cate are a great couple. And Patricia asks, what is Kate's favorite section to read first?
Oh, that's a good question. Travel. Yeah. Although the travel section this year has been, I can't imagine being a travel editor during a pandemic, but I'm super excited to read this
road trip. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
And we had Amy Vership, the travel editor of the New York Times, on our show, and you can go back and watch that. Mm-hmm. Neil got to go to her home and read the Sunday paper with the travel editor of the New York Times. It was fantastic. Oh, and we have other comments here. Pudnya is watching from the Waffle House in Yorktown, Virginia. And you may all have heard about the Waffle House story about a guy who lost a bet and was supposed to be there for 24 hours and stayed as long as he could. We have Apollo watching from Montclair, New Jersey. And look who's watching.
I hope he's watching. I don't know how he's watching and wrangling our child, but
what would you like to say to him today?
I suppose I should say Happy Father's Day. And I suppose, I don't know, this whole book, I don't know if he believes me when I say this, but this whole book is a love letter to him. So.
Oh, that's beautiful. I'm glad to hear that. I hope he heard that live. Otherwise, I'm sure people will be texting him that you said that. Patricia says the universal language is most certainly love, and lots of other great comments coming in here. And Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar says Happy Father's Day and Juneteenth. All of that coming together. And Paula has put in a link to your husband's Twitter handle, and there's G. Michael McElroy. So that's awesome. Thank you, Paula. And if you're new here, Paula says, we read the paper, but we also discuss many other issues of the day, especially when we have a guest as we today. Feel free to comment, and we would love to hear your comments. Please tag a friend. Please share this with a friend. They can watch live or later. But let's get to the paper, and we'll come back to hear more about your wonderful book. So as I look at the paper, just jump in at any point if you have a thought on any of the stories you see here, Cate. Mm-hmm. And let's see, lead stories about two stories about elections, one in Iran and one in New York. Do you have an opinion on the New York mayoral race?
I have no opinion. My opinion is I'm really glad I don't have to vote in this race. I'm sorry to say.
And ranked choice voting, right? That's even more complicated.
Yeah.
And GOP expands power and remade voting board. So another voting story here. And then DA on the left in Los Angeles faces a revolt. And Afghan pilots dread absence of contractors. And that's one of the consequences of America leaving of Afghanistan. And on the road again, finally, is a pointer to this special section on road trips. And worried by dirty money, U.S. examines the secrecy of art sales, and they're trying to make art sales more transparent.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. Behind the scenes is David Vesey's talking about the writer and his father, a dad and an audience of one. And this is about George Vesey, who the great sports writer. And he retired in 2011. And David is an editor at the Times Print Hub. And we did a fabulous New York Times read along with George. And so great to see that. And back in 1991, today, 30 years ago, Pablo Escobar gave up in Colombia. One of the things that's changed over your life at the New York Times is there are all these more kind of service journalism-y, servicey items. And so here's what to avoid on Amazon Prime Day, which is coming up. I don't know if it's I guess it's a global thing, but that's happening. And so lots of tips like this. And let's see. Well, you mentioned Tiffany's. We learned from Stuart Elliott, who was the longtime advertising columnist, when he was on our show, that from 1917 to say 2020, Tiffany's booked this A3 spot in the New York Times. And now this company, Monica Rich Kozan, has this. Being on the Wedding Beat, maybe you know this brand, but they are making a name for themselves by booking that ad. They've been there every week since we noticed this. One of the things that's changed, Kate, in the last year is they had obviously tracking the outbreak as a special section, curated section. Now all the COVID coverage has gone back into their own sections. A smaller torch, but a promise equally imposing. I'm not sure why France is sending another Lady Liberty to New York, and some ask whose freedom it celebrates, and why the French have so much time and money and energy to do this. I'm not sure, but this is the second Statue of Liberty coming. And then we also noticed Facebook has been running these full-page ads asking for internet regulations. And they should be careful what they wish for. And here is severe drought grips Brazil as fire season looms. And here's something unusual. Speaking of travel, you know about all the stories about problems coming out of Portland, Oregon. And this is an ad for Portland, full page in the New York Times. You've heard a lot about us lately. It's been a while since you heard from us. And we have faith in the future. We're building it every day. The only way we know how, by being Portland. Come see for yourself. Love Portland and travel Portland. This is Portland, etc. Interestingly, I don't think they mentioned that they're Portland, Oregon versus Portland, Maine. And this is like a free ad for reminding people that Portland, Maine exists.
That's true. They do say West Coast.
Yeah, they do say that here, but
yeah.
You can imagine if you're just flipping through this.
Yeah.
I would have put an Oregon somewhere in here, but this is interesting. What do you think of this?
I'm always curious. You know, I worked at a PR firm after leaving the Times, and I'm always curious. And I read ad copy like this, like who is the audience? Like who are they looking for? Who is this tested on? How was this workshopped? Was this, who was the sensitivity reader on this? I'm always curious about how this stuff. I mean, so here's a line. We are a place of dualities that are never polarities. That's some interesting language. And I guess it's geared to a very a stereotypical Timesian reader, but it sure is funky ad copy. But
and for those of you lacking the context of this is after the protests of last summer. A lot of protests are still happening in Portland, even though they've ended in most other places. Right. They're still happening. And here's a full page celebrating Condé Nast's 28 finalists and winners of the National Magazine Awards. For many years, I had the honor of chairing the online magazine awards version for the magazine awards, the online section, and it was always great to see how great on magazines translate their work into online. The Maldives welcome tourists back. Now it needs nurses. and COVID outbreak story. And sorry about that. Oh, sorry, folks. Every motorcycle decided. I'm sorry about that. Morning motorcycles on a Sunday. And cruising is, of course, in the news. Cruises have started again, but also COVID outbreaks on various stories. Would you go back on a cruise, or have you been on a cruise?
Cruises are not my thing, although we did just rebook some tickets to Japan. So we've got some 13-hour plane trips in front of us. So I feel like if we can handle a 13-hour plane trip, I think cruises might not be such a bad idea.
I presume after the Olympics?
Yes, in October. We were supposed to go last May, and then,
land of my birth. So please say hello to all my friends there. I was born in Tokyo. Iran elects ultra-conservative for next president. Turnout declines. And we know the elections there are not free and fair. Of course, anytime anyone says something like that, and when Americans say that, then they say, well, look at your elections and what is happening with the craziness there. In fire-prone canyon, threat of catastrophe is the norm. And this is the national section. And Pope's silence speaks volumes about Bishop's vote. This is a story about how Joe Biden, even though he's the most devout Catholic, only the second Catholic to be president, and one of the most faith-minded presidents we've ever had, is likely to be, or has, the bishops have voted to deny him communion because his political stance on abortion. And then another.
This is funny because I have the national edition.
Mm-hmm.
Yours and mine are quite different. Like, I don't think that story is in my edition.
Oh, wow. Did the Biden's dog passing make it? This is the story of Champ.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. They still have Major. And then look, this is a 2-pager about Google Workspace, which is, I guess, a competitor to Slack and other tools, Microsoft Teams. Mm-hmm. And I don't know enough about it. If anybody does, please jump in and tell us more. And they're showing you all the things you can do on Google Workspace. Finally, Juneteenth, the holiday. A long-held celebration of slavery's end becomes an American tradition everywhere. Worried by dirty money, U.S. examines secrecy of art sales. And football star could upend Senate race. And this is about Herschel Walker might run in Georgia. And he's a Trump apologist. Colorado baker fined for cake refusal. Can you update us on the story about cakes and same-sex marriages and things like that?
So I believe that story actually did. That story actually did make it into my edition. So that was a baker. I believe it was in Colorado Springs. No, I guess Denver. So the baker told a patron that they wouldn't bake a birthday cake because this person is transgender. And you've seen, across the country, we've seen many cases like this. Bakeries denying cakes to same-sex couples on their wedding day, or bakers refusing to. Why is it bakers? It's always bakers, I swear. And in this case, it was a birthday cake that was blue on the outside and pink on the inside because this person who requested the cake is a transgender woman. And so this baker was fined $500, apparently. And, this denial of service gets into all sorts of different issues, and First Amendment and free speech and expression and all of that. But at the heart of it, it's obviously, to my mind, blatant discrimination.
And so I'm sorry, I had said this was for a wedding cake, but those are the stories we all will also hear about, right?
Most of the stories up until now have been about wedding cakes, and it's not just bakeries. Honestly, that there's a wedding venue here in Raleigh that refused to hold a wedding for 2 men, and it's a place that's pretty well trafficked. I believe it's a former plantation, which gets into all sorts of different issues, but anyway, so there's all sorts of these denial of service stories across the country, and it's just discrimination.
This is something that's happened since you've left New York. Whose park is it? Residents and revelers clash over Washington Square Park. That's near NYU, for those of you who know your New York City. Disorder and chaos in New York City jail system as pandemic recedes. I'm glad it's receding, but it's too bad about the crisis. Adams calls alliance of mayoral rivals hypocrisy, and there's talk of a partnership between Catherine Garcia and Andrew Yang, as they're, because of this ranked choice voting, so they're saying vote for the other person.
Oh, okay.
And one stolen password gave hackers access to New York City's deepest secrets. A reminder, everybody, please do two-factor authentication. It really makes a difference in keeping your account safe. Let's talk about the obits. I'm a big fan of reading the obits. And here is an obit of Ava Serini, maybe, photographer who captured movie stars at work, dies at 86. Here's father and son, or at least movie father and son. This is Indiana Jones Sr. and Indy Jr. And from the third installment of Raiders of the Lost Ark. And Madeline Davis, 80, lesbian who spoke to the nation, selected as a delegate to the Democratic National Convention. And you were saying how sometimes it was hard to say the word lesbian in the New York Times, and here it is in a headline.
Yeah.
And Linda Amster, who was with us for the Pentagon paper show we did a couple of weeks ago, she said that, you know, as a researcher, sometimes at one point somebody asked her to find a lesbian to quote in the paper, and that's how rare that was.
Great.
Frank Bonner, 79, actor on WKRP in Cincinnati. A show that I used to watch, and there he is. Some of you will remember him, and some of you will remember that show.
You know, one question I've gotten on several different book talks is, what's more interesting, wedding announcements or obits? When reading the paper, and I always think the obits are more because they capture a life in full. And I'm so excited you're having Margot Fox on. I mean, she is just untouchable in terms of capturing a life. I think that's going to be such a great show.
Let's remind everyone what's coming up on our shows, including Margot. So we'll show you a list. So next week, for Pride, we have Jonathan Borstein with us. We're taking American Independence Day off. July 11th, Margot Fox will be with us, obit writer at the New York Times, and so much more. July 18th, a Washington Post read-along. Neil will be showing off the print edition of the Washington Post, and Philip Bump, a huge star at the Washington Post, will be with us, and then back to a New York Times read-along with Shashank Bengali out of London. We have about 20 minutes left, and we've only made it through the front paper, so let's go quickly to some other sections here. Sunday styles. Tell us what it meant to have the weddings incorporated in this section, and how it all tied together, and what this section means to you. It's also on better paper, as we learned. The quality of paper is better.
So the Sunday Style section, I don't know who the new editor is. The outgoing editor is Corey Sisha. And Corey has been a fixture in New York media for a long time. He actually started at Gawker. And the fact that one of the original members of Gawker became the Sunday Styles editor is, I think, really fascinating, and just shows the evolution of the section. Do they still, I should know this, do they still do that men's style section anymore, or has that gone away?
I'm not sure. I maybe in T, or maybe a separate thing, but
I think they folded it in. But, you know, I think the Styles has served as a catch-all for many different types of stories. And it's not just at the Times and Post. I mean, lots of different news organizations have tried to figure out what can fold into styles. And I think it's really just any story that really digs deep into how we live now, whatever that might be. And maybe is not necessarily connected to some sort of policy or political change or anything like that. I mean, so this story, for example, like this, what's in this tuna sandwich? I mean, when was it? It was like a year ago or something like that. No, late January, somebody sued Subway for saying that and said that their tuna sandwich had absolutely no tuna in it whatsoever. I have only eaten a tuna sandwich from Subway maybe once in my life, and I have no memory of it. But it takes a lot of time, and it costs a lot of money to file a lawsuit. And so there clearly was something behind this lawsuit. And so Corey Sisha tweeted that he just became obsessed with this idea. Well, if it's not tuna, then what is it? And so he got Julia Carmel to take a deep dive into the world of canned fish.
By the way, the tuna is my go-to sandwich at Subway. So I should be reading this, or maybe I don't want to read it because I don't want to know. I don't want to know what it is, shark or something else. Patricia asked a good question. Did Cate ever have to write an obit or advanced obit? Did that ever come up?
I'm sure I did. I'm sure I wrote. I honestly can't remember.
Or you may have contributed to one.
I certainly have contributed. I certainly contributed to them. I don't remember, honestly. I certainly wrote enough about victims of mass shootings, if those can be considered obits. But in terms of being on the obituaries desk, I don't remember. It's a really good question. I'll have to go back and go through my clips. I really don't.
And folks, if you are interested in obits and that issue, please check out a great app, Miss You Graham, where you can see how you can pay tribute to folks. So Miss You Graham, please check that out. Can you talk a little bit about the social cues column, and I might put you on the spot and ask you one of these questions.
Sure. So the Times has what am I doing here? The Times loves to answer reader questions. And this one is sort of their answer to Dear Abby / etiquette. And Philip I can never pronounce his name. Galanis has been writing this for quite a long time, and it is I love reading this, and it's people trying to figure out what they should do in socially awkward or ethically questionable situations. So, what is going on here?
So let me ask you one of these questions. No right or wrong answer. No peeking. Don't look at the answer. At the end of a long weekend, we drove our house guests to the train station. They were running late and asked us to hurry. They didn't want to miss their train. Cut to, we're stopped by the police for speeding. Who should pay the speeding ticket? So you tell us.
Oh my gosh. Well, I am. You'd like to think that if you're the passenger who is saying, go, 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 I'm going to be late, you would offer to pay the speeding ticket, because you were the one who is making this poor driver step on the gas.
And by the way, I presume they missed the train anyway.
I guess they got pulled, yeah.
So here's the answer according to Philip, and it says, sorry, Jim, the person behind the wheel is responsible, but thoughtful guests would have offered to pay the ticket, or at least split it with you under the circumstances. So I think you both have the same answer there. That's
how
great.
much is a speeding ticket? I mean, $150, like,
yeah,
you
not worth ruining a friendship over.
No.
So, do you know what the answer was here? Do you want to tell me if you read this? I don't know if you read this yet.
I haven't finished it.
Okay. All right. So
doesn't it look like a tuna popsicle? Oh god.
What is that? That looks very, very, very scary. All right. Where would you like to go next? We don't have a lot of time, but we can look at maybe a couple more sections.
Well, let's see. Let's look through the travel section. I kind of want to get a jump on this.
Oh yeah, the road trip. Yeah.
The road trip.
This might be the bridge to the travel section when it comes back.
Yeah.
Like everything in our world, hitting the highway has changed. So I tell people I don't like driving, but I'd like to drive an RV one day and go on a trip. So this is Amy Vership. This summer, we're back on the road. And so this is the travel editor, Amy, who's incredible New York Times read-along. You can watch in our archive on my YouTube channel, SriNat. Please check that out. And so she's written the letter here. And an Arizona birding adventure. And look at all these great photographs. The
Oh.
ghosts of Georgia's Golden Isles.
I can't wait to read this. I love this area of Georgia, and it's so mysterious and so heavy with history. I cannot wait to read this part.
And driving the states of Maine, the quiet strength of an old growth forest. And this is about California. I know my friend Diana would love this.
Mm-hmm.
And who wants a hotel with a hallway? High-end motels, exterior corridor hotels, whatever you call them. The Motorist Hotel has gotten a boost now about that reputation you're talking about.
Now, I read this piece earlier on a couple of days ago online, and because I've noticed these have been cropping up just around the South, these old motor lodges that people have refurbished and have become these sort of hip, adorable, relatively, at least down here, relatively inexpensive destinations. Like there's an old Days Inn down in downtown Raleigh, which was not a place you wanted to go. And now it's called the Longleaf Motel. And there's this fabulous bar, and a room there is like, I don't know, a couple $100 a night. And you can walk to any number of Ashley Christensen restaurants. And so it's very funny to me that these old motor lodges have sort of gotten their due. And you don't have to interact with anybody else, which is key. You can just walk, you know?
Sure. Carla says, I was at a restaurant yesterday that had imported canned tuna on its menu. So that's and Sujana says, Sri's made me start reading the obits regularly. And thank you. Let's see. Will says a tuna popsicle and has a sad face there. And 5 things to know before road tripping this summer. 1, you won't be alone because there's so many people. Crossing state lines will be easier, but don't toss the masks just yet. Rental cars will be hard to come by, so plan ahead and be flexible. Research well, book in advance, and brace for closures. And prepare for what could be long stretches in the car. So, good warning.
That's the essence of a road trip, right? Those long stretches in the car and counting the road signs and, playing I Spy.
Touring Alaska in an RV. Oh, look at that.
Yeah.
And let's do one more. Charged up for a ride in Colorado and entering barn quilt country. And here's another ad for cruises. So we're almost out of time, so we're just going to look at some of these covers. Real estate, my sister, my neighbor. At the height of the pandemic, some siblings moved in together. And also anything you want to say about any of these sections, feel free. Here is Sunday Review. Whose Juneteenth is it? And let's look at the Leave This Island to the Birds. And will senators protect service members? The answer is no, they will not, unfortunately. The groom was a 14-year-old bride's rapist. Nick Kristof on this beat doing such important work about protecting girls in so many ways. The strange death of liberal Russophobia. How Biden is wisely opting out of Cold War 2.0. And reset the abortion debate. The Supreme Court is an opportunity to start a new conversation. When Juneteenth becomes a national holiday, can it remain black? And also lots of people pointing out that we're celebrating Juneteenth, but you're not allowed to teach about Juneteenth and why it's there. And then Frank Bruni has a goodbye column. He's becoming a professor at UNC, at Duke. And so this is his final column.
Really?
And he says, Ted Cruz, did I do you wrong? As I leave this job after 10 years, I wish I'd handled many columns better. I don't know why he'd need to apologize to Ted Cruz. And he does have a newsletter for the Times that he's going to write after this. So Arts and Leisure, the 21 best TV comedies of all time.
This is a good one.
Name a couple of your favorite and we'll see if they made it.
Parks and Rec, which is on there.
Oh, so you've seen the list. Okay. So
I have.
Okay.
I have. But some of the things that I thought would be on the list are not. Of course, I can't remember what they are now. But.
So let's see here. I'll tell you which of these I love. Curb Your Enthusiasm, yes. Chappelle Show, yes. The Comeback I haven't seen, but this is Lisa Kudrow. After Friends, Arrested Development, great show. It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. It says The Office, your kid's favorite show. And my kids do love that. 30 Rock. I've never heard of Party Down, so I should check that out. Parks and Rec made it. Community, 6 seasons and a philosophy. I'm really surprised Louis made it, considering, Louis C.K. has rightly been, we've attempted to cancel him. He's sort of back. Why they would do this now and put him in this, I'm surprised. I don't know if you read this, so I don't know anything about that.
I did. Well, it's interesting because I was waiting for them to call it out, and they did, I think, pretty well. The first time they mentioned his name is Louis C.K. is a comedian who used his celebrity to exploit and abuse women. Louis is a dark, formally inventive, and often savagely funny TV show about a comedian. Blah, blah, blah. And I will say, my husband and I loved watching Louis, and before all of the revelations, and now, I don't know, many things can be true at once, I think.
And then look at these other shows here. By the way, it's nice to have 21 instead of just having 10, so they get a lot more room in here. Yeah. Nathan Few I've not seen. Girls, I watched the first couple of seasons, I think. Mm-hmm. And then Broad City, BoJack Horseman I've not seen. Atlanta gets a lot of reviews.
Atlanta's
Better Things.
Amazing.
And I don't know how to pronounce this. Is it 10:15?
10:15, yes.
and Veep didn't make the list, so I'm surprised about that. I love the show, and the Boondocks should have been in there as well, but those are the honorable mentions. And
I'm surprised Schitt's Creek isn't in here.
Yeah, I think a lot of people were upset that Schitt's Creek didn't make it, and especially at this moment, it's so popular, right?
Yeah.
Some of these other shows. Well, Metropolitan you don't get in your paper. This is only in the tri-state area. So let me just show you what you're missing. Roosevelt Island would like more visitors, please. They have now a fancy university there on the island. It might have been after you left that it opened. And Neil will be reading this. Yankee star is now in step with a football trailblazer. Mariano Rivera and other at New Rochelle's Walk of Fame event about Fritz Pollard, who was a pioneer in football. And here's more about Roosevelt Island. This is a place that tourists see when they're in Manhattan, but don't get to visit. There's a cable car. And look at this nice photo of all these saris there. Paula says, I love Roosevelt Island. One of my favorite New York City things. Nice, Paula. That's great. And Metropolitan Diary, which is always fun. It used to run on Mondays, I remember. Mm-hmm. And now it's here. The Sunday cover is What Are We Going to Wear? And the book review is about the center of American politics. And I don't know if you had a chance to. This story was circulating a long time online before it's in the magazine.
I have it. I've opened it 16 times to read it, and I've read the first, 10 inches. Then I had to do something else, but it is lovely, and hard, I think.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is turn off my camera here and go back to you. And as we wrap up here, tell us please more about the book and where we can find you online and what we can see. A compulsively readable behind-the-scenes memoir, Mergers and Acquisitions, or Everything I Know About Love I Learned from the Wedding Pages. I think it's a throwback to one of my favorite books when I was much younger, about Robert Fulghum's Everything I Know I Learned in Kindergarten.
That's right. It is. So Mergers and Acquisitions can be purchased at your favorite local indie bookstore. Mine is Quail Ridge Books. It was published May 4th, and it's out there on shelves now. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Cate Doty. My website is catedoty.com. And
Neil's showing your website.
Cate, your microphone muted again. If you can unmute your mic, that'd be great.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
So we're looking at your website.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Folks, this is Cate Doty, and we're looking at her website at catedoty.com, D-O-T-Y. Everyone check that out. Let's look at some comments that are coming in. Liz Pressman says, Bojack, yes. And Sujana says, is the Cornell Creamery still sending the best ice cream down to Cornell Engineering on Roosevelt Island? That's a good question. And then Jonathan Borstein is saying, fun and informative show. Jonathan, then the bar has been set for next week's episode. We have another great guest who's joining us. That's Jonathan Borstein who will be here. And Cate, welcome back. And let's point out that our guest, Jonathan, is a writer, urban ecologist, editorial consultant in both new and traditional media, and his work has appeared in 30 different publications. And we're going to celebrate the end of Pride Month with him appearing. So, Cate, you were telling us about the book, and
Sorry.
yeah,
Sorry.
no, it's okay. This happens, no problem. So, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
And we're just very grateful to you, Cate, for being with us today. And tell us what you have planned for Michael on Father's Day.
Well, I have a present for him somewhere in the mess of my office. We were going to go to the pool, but it's storming. So we may just have a lazy day, and I may just send him out to do whatever he wants. But generally speaking, that's just hanging out with us anyway. So. Oh,
that's awesome. So hello to Michael, and happy Father's Day to him on this. And we're so glad that he let you be with us today.
Well, happy Father's Day to you both as well. And thank you so much for including me. This has been so much fun. And I love talking about M&A, but I also love talking about the Times. So this has been a real treat. So thank you.
So, yeah, before we let you go, we're going to give you a chance to give us a final thought about the book and why people should buy it. But before we do that, we're just going to preview what's coming up for our shows. Next, we have at 11 a.m., Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Marina Kurian have She's on Call, and medical school and summer safety tips on all social media. You can find She's on Call, and they have 3 great medical students. So please join us for that. Summer safety tips, so important. And we also want to tell folks about this incredible team, Paula, Steve, Carla, Julia, and Neil. Thank you very much for all you do. We have some great episodes coming up, Neil. In addition to Jonathan, we have no show on July 4th, but Margaret Fox on July 11th, Obits writer at the New York Times. Philip Bump will be with us doing a Washington Post read-along. And then back to the New York Times, Shashank Bengali, an editor in London for the New York Times, but formerly with the LA Times. So we'll get lots of great ideas there. Jeanette says, what a clever and compelling approach. Weddings are so full of emotion, sentiment, and often drama. And Sujana says, speaking of Pride Month, I watched the movie Pride on a Plane yesterday. Lesbian and gay support of the striking miners in Wales in the 1980s. Awesome. Rahadian says, stay safe, strong, and healthy, everyone. And Naomi says, the New York Times lead magazine story today is moving and perfect for Father's Day. So we are excited, and we have an answer about the ice cream from Cornell Creamery is being sold on Roosevelt Island. Hi, Neil.
And we want to give a shout out again to our team, Paula, Steve, Julia, and Carla. And in particular, we want to give a shout out to Carla Baranauckas, who works through Montclair State University. The Center for Cooperative Media at Montclair State University brings you a local connection newsletter each week, offering story ideas and pro tips for journalists. And the best of all, it's free. You can subscribe at bit.ly/local news tips, bit.ly/local news tips. And Paula has shared a link in Facebook as well.
I tell all my students to subscribe, and even if you're not a journalist in America, you'll love reading the newsletter. Carla does a great job. Ellen says, great, Paula, Neil, etc. So now I think we bring back Cate Doty to give us a final pitch for the book.
Let's see. Why you should buy my book. I'm not very good at this. I should have a better elevator pitch. But this book is a memoir, of course, and it definitely shows a lot about what it was like during a period of time to work at the New York Times. But I think that, we're all into love. We all love romantic love, even though, we may make a show of rejecting it. And I think these wedding announcements are a peek into who people are and the way that we live as humans in this country. And so if you're interested in that, if you're interested in funny love stories, if you're interested in the New York Times, if you're looking for a good beach read, Oprah said it was a good beach read, which is amazing. So,
wow.
Please,
You got the Oprah endorsement. That's huge.
I did. Well, I don't know. It was Oprah. I think it might have been one of her editors, but yes.
You got to work that into your website.
Whatever.
That should be the lead. We should have started with that. But thank you, Cate, and happy Father's Day to Michael. Happy Father's Day, Neil. I'm getting the hook here. The family's insisting I come back in and say hello to everybody. So thank you, everybody. We'll see you next week. Sundays, 8:30 a.m. Please join us, and thank you very much.
Great.
You guys.
Bye.
Happy Father's Day. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.